I'm going to close here with debunking the benefits of being a corporation. And by the way, if you want to actually see all of them, I don't have the time to do it today. You'll have to read my book in order to do that, because you talk about mythology here. Limited liability protection. Now, this is an absolute myth. The attorneys, and here's a strategy. By the way, fear sells. Did you know that? Fear is a powerful marketing tool. We see it on the TV. If you watch TV, you see it in commercials and so forth. Man, a lot of ads try and scare you into buying something. Well, this is what attorneys frequently do. Pastor, I checked the Secretary of State records, and I saw that your church isn't incorporated. Don't you know that Grandma Jones, she just walked in the church last month, down the block, fell down over a rumple in the carpet, broke her hip. Now she's suing the pastor. She's not only suing the church, she's suing the pastor, the deacons, the elders, and the entire membership over this. And if she's successful in the lawsuit, she can collect out of everybody in the church. Oh my goodness. Well, what can you do for us, attorney? Well, we can incorporate. We can give you this limited liability protection. Well, friends, I have asked hundreds of attorneys to show me one case. Show me the Grandma Jones case. And they can't do it. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's an impossible legal scenario, but I just can't find the case, and they can't produce it for me. I can show you hundreds of cases within an hour's time of incorporated churches that have been sued. Friends, did you realize that the second attribute of being a corporation, now the attorneys don't like to talk about this one, but this is the second legal attribute. A corporation can sue and be sued. Wow, isn't that a wonderful legal benefit? You get to be sued. Friends, did you know a church cannot be sued? Did you know it's a legal impossibility? The reason is because a church is not, and this is critical language to understand, a church is not an entity recognized in law. To be sued, you have to be recognized in law. And churches are not within the scope of any civil court. So therefore, it cannot be sued. So this is a myth. It's worse than a myth. This is a blatant misrepresentation, if not a lie. Now, this is one minor truth, but it's a half-truth the attorneys tell. Well, if you don't incorporate, you can't hold title of property. You see, I use this to my advantage. Okay, well, why is that, Mr. Smarty Pants attorney? Why couldn't a church hold title of property?
Well, because it's not an entity recognized in law.
Oh, is that a bad thing? Well, fine, but there's mechanisms for doing that. Friends, we're hearing about history today. I just advocate, let's go back in history and take a look. What did churches do prior to this modern trend? In fact, it's an industrial era trend of incorporating churches. Did you know prior to the turn of the 20th century, it's almost impossible to identify incorporated churches in America? There's a very good legal and important historical and constitutional reason why, and I've written about that in my book. You go back, you try and find some incorporated churches for me prior to the turn of the 20th century. Pretty difficult to do that. So how did churches have the beneficial use of church property back then? Well, it wasn't through incorporation, but they couldn't do that. But there are other things that they commonly did do. And that's what we're doing with churches today. We're going back to those old paths, and they work very, very well. And they don't drag the church within the jurisdiction of the government, nor do they subordinate the church to the government. And lastly, well, after all, if you don't incorporate, you're just an unincorporated association. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Well, look at it this way. What happens when you walk into a government office and you ask a question? You know, and I need some help here today. 9 out of 10 times what the clerk is going to do, she's going to go get a form, and she presents you with a form. Say, here, sir, start filling this out for us. What are they trying to do? They're trying to get you to make admissions and confessions. And one of the most important admissions they want you to make is that you are under their jurisdiction. And so they say, you have choice A or choice B. You could be a corporation or you can be an unincorporated association. If I had time, I'd bring my attorney friend up here and I'd say, no, we are a church. church. Right. It's not choice A and choice B. And by the way, when I work with bureaucrats, my wife will tell you I've got a very odd sense of humor. I think my humor is perfectly normal. But my wife gets embarrassed over the things I do, and she usually disappears if I create a scene, as she says. But, sometimes if I've got a little free time on my hand, I love to just sort of role play. And let's go into a government office and just start asking questions, see what happens. And they'll present me with a form, and they go off and, attend to their work, and they come back, and by the time they come back, I've got all kinds of modifications to the form. And those bureaucrats have a conniption fit. It drives them crazy. It's like you committed a crime for modifying their form. I say, but you didn't have the right checkbox on the form. See, I have to make my own checkboxes here because we're a church. Now, you know what the response has been of some of these bureaucrats to me? Some of them get very upset. And they say, Mr. Kershaw, you're just operating in the no man's land of jurisdiction. Now, what are they declaring? We don't have any jurisdiction over you. And I point out, excuse me, ma'am, I'm not an anarchist here, okay? I believe in government. I love government. My God created and ordained civil government, and you, honey, are his minister. And I'll give her a little sermon from Romans 13. Sometimes they appreciate that, sometimes they don't. You know the ones who don't appreciate it? Christians. Did you know that? It's the non-Christians who are often receptive. Sometimes the Christians get very upset at me for preaching them a sermon out of the Bible. Now, and I point out, honey, I'm not in the no man's land of jurisdiction. I'm in Jesus' jurisdiction. I'm under his authority. And thank you for acknowledging that our church isn't under your jurisdiction. Now, I don't have time to read this. This case, Hale versus Henkel, is a landmark case. What that means in legal terms is a very, very significant case upon which many other subsequent cases were based. And directly from the determination of the U.S. Supreme Court in the Hale versus Henkel case, here's what we learned. I'm giving you this is not my interpretation, these are direct quotes. A corporation is a creature of the state. Pastor, when you incorporate your church, you cannot honestly, either legally or theologically, say, Jesus is the head of my church. Your church has become a creature of the state. It is incorporated for the benefit of the public. Friends, this is one reason why I would submit to you that, hey, if ACT UP, the sodomite organization, wants to come into your church on Sunday morning while you're preaching and yell and scream and throw pamphlets around and say, that you're a bunch of homophobes and so forth, then, they're free to do that. Why? Your church was created for the benefit of the public, and they're part of the public, like it or not. A corporation is a state franchise. Ooh, what sort of word picture might that draw up in our mind? And why? Exactly. Franchises, friends, are for conformance and continuity and consistency. That's why you franchise something. Incorporation is a state privilege. It's not a right. It's a privilege and a benefit granted by the state. Corporation is subject to the laws of the state. And when the Supreme Court says that, they mean all of the laws. And what that means is you incorporate your church, and then you say, for example, I could give you hundreds of examples, but let's say you then want to have a church school, K through 12 school. You realize that in most states, the state then calls the shots in terms of what curriculum you use, what kind of hours you keep, how many hours of instruction, in what subjects as well. And in many states, they're going to tell you, you have to teach Darwinism as well. You're subject to all the laws of the state. Its powers are limited by law. Well, why should a church be self-limiting? According to civil statute, which in many cases are hostile to the church. This is one reason why I say this limited liability protection is so misguided, most pastors never stop and ask the question, who provides the protection? Well, it's the state. Now, is that smart? Is that wise? Is that prudent? Especially in our day and age, more than ever, I would submit to you, you can't support biblically the notion that the church should go to the state and say, oh, protect us, please. Obviously Jesus can't protect us. Okay? Don't you see how much this undermines our testimony for Christ? Pastors standing up in their pulpit Sunday after Sunday, and they give an altar call and say, friends, I've been a Christian my whole life. I'm 50 years old. I can tell you Jesus is trustworthy. He's provided for me. He's always protected me. Trust in Jesus. And you'd think he really believed what he was saying up there. But Monday morning rolls around, in strolls the attorney. Pastor, don't you know you could be sued? You're not incorporated. You're not protected. Trust in the state. Obviously, Jesus is incompetent to protect you. Well, the attorney doesn't say all that, but that's really what it boils down to. It must obey the laws of its creation. Okay? It's a creation, and it has to obey the Creator. And friends, lastly, a corporation doesn't have any constitutionally protected rights. This is fundamentally the reason why pastors have been silenced, because they don't have any constitutionally protected rights when they're in an incorporated pulpit. And to add insult to injury, they not only turn their pulpits into regulated business franchises of the state, which is what corporations are, but they put another gag on by taking the 501c3. This is an absolutely terrible thing. I am out of time. I wish I had more time. It's hopefully been a blessing to you. Let me summarize by simply saying, friends, don't go out of here today, and I know some of you might be a little upset with all this news, but don't go out of here today and rail on your preacher about it, okay? Some of you didn't even know this until 10 minutes ago yourself, and your preacher probably doesn't know it either, and you can catch more bees with honey than vinegar. So don't get in your preacher's face and yell and call him names, but encourage him, provide him with some of these materials, and encourage him to get informed about these vital issues, because they are having a profound, and I would submit to you, a devastating impact on the testimony of the Lord Jesus Christ. And friends, as goes the church, so goes the nation. Our nation is rapidly going downhill, and I believe that apart from restoring the church to its former glory and the influence that she once held in the culture, I don't believe there's a great deal of hope for America. Thank you very much.